So today I'll teach you how to write a Petrarchan sonnet, and then hopefully after discussion here and trying out a little iambic pentameter, then next week you'll have something like a Petrarchan sonnet that you've written, and then we'll read it aloud and discuss it. And you don't have to read it, I can read it for you, or whatever, and then we'll just say, well, yeah, that is a Petrarchan sonnet, or wow, that's really amazing, or whatever. So that's the plan for these 2 weeks.
Well, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. So this week we're doing a workshop on the Petrarchan sonnet, which was actually established in the 1300s by an Italian poet named Petrarch, who wrote, in his lifetime he wrote about 350 sonnets, and I think all of them were in the Petrarchan form. He was Italian, and he was really the one who established the sonnet as the form to be used for writing love poems. It's concise, you can put a lot of heart into it, but yet, it only takes about a minute to read it out loud. So I'm going to start off. So Petrarch started in the 1300s, and then in the Elizabethan era, which was like the late 1500s, it gained traction in English, and a lot of sonnets were written in the late 1500s when Queen Elizabeth I was Queen of England. A lot of those were Shakespearean sonnets, because Shakespeare was writing at that time, and he kind of took his own structure with you'll see when we talk about rhyme schemes how the Petrarchan sonnet is different from the Shakespearean sonnet. But during the Elizabethan era, there was a mix of Petrarchan sonnets and Shakespearean sonnets. Some of my favorite sonnets are Petrarchan sonnets, and I was surprised. So when I was looking for the Shakespearean sonnets, I was looking at John Keats, and I thought, well, he only wrote Shakespearean sonnets, right? And I'm looking and I said, no, this is Petrarchan. So I'm actually gonna read a Petrarchan sonnet by John Keats, and one of my absolute favorite sonnet writers is Edna St. Vincent Millay, who started writing in the early 1920s, and she kept writing until her death in 1950. And she has written, in my opinion, some of the best sonnets in the English language, and a lot of the sonnets she wrote were Petrarchan sonnets. I'm going to read 2 of those today, one in the introduction, and then the sample that we're going to look at for studying the form of the Petrarchan sonnet is going to be a sonnet by Edna St. Vincent Millay. But one of the most famous sonnets of all time is by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. It was written for the man she loved and went on to marry, Robert Browning. This was in the 19th century. And her family did not approve of Robert Browning. I don't know why. They did not approve of Robert Browning, and so these love letters that she wrote to him in the form of sonnets, she titled Sonnets from the Portuguese, trying to pass them off as translations and not her own personal love poems. So I'm going to read a poem that you've probably heard before. So she wrote about, how many are in this? There are 44 sonnets in this Sonnets from the Portuguese sequence. I'm going to read you number 43. It goes like this. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach, when feeling out of sight for the ends of being in ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need. By sun and candlelight, I love thee freely as men strive for right I love thee purely as they turn from praise. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs, and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life, and if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. So that was Sonnet 43 by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and from her sonnet sequence, Sonnets from the Portuguese. If you're familiar with sonnets at all, Shakespearean sonnets usually end with a rhyming couplet. And while it is possible to end a Petrarchan sonnet with a rhyming couplet, it usually doesn't. But there are a lot of couplets in it in the first 8 lines. So next I'm going to read what appears to be the first sonnet that Edna St. Vincent Millay wrote. And it is a Petrarchan sonnet. Most of her sonnets are untitled. A few of them had titles, but most of them are untitled. Thou art not lovelier than lilacs, no, nor honeysuckle. Thou art not more fair than small, white, single poppies. I can bear thy beauty, though I bend before thee, though from left to right, not knowing where to go, I turn my troubled eyes, nor here nor there find any refuge from thee. Yet I swear, so has it been with mist, with moonlight so. Like him who day by day unto his draught of delicate poison adds him 1 drop more, till he may drink unharmed the death of 10. Even so, inured to beauty, who have quaffed each hour more deeply than the hour before, I drink and live what has destroyed some men. So that was, I suppose, sonnet number 1 by Edna St. Vincent Millay. And this one you may have heard. It is a poet you're probably familiar with. This is by John Keats. This has always been one of my favorites. It's called On the Grasshopper and the Cricket. It was from his poems published in 1817, and it was, it's labeled number 15. So, On the Grasshopper and the Cricket. The poetry of the earth is never dead. When all the birds are faint with the hot sun and hide in cooling trees, a voice will run from hedge to hedge about the new mown mead. That is the grasshopper's. He takes the lead in summer luxury. He has never done with his delights, for when tired out with fun, he rests at ease beneath some pleasant weed. The poetry of the earth is ceasing never. On a lone winter evening, when the frost has wrought a silence from the stove, there shrills the cricket's song, in warmth increasing ever, and seems to one in drowsiness half lost, the grasshoppers among some grassy hills. So that is the third introductory poem. And now, this is a translation. I did not realize this, except that I spent a lot of time, I've loved sonnets since I was a senior in high school and was first introduced to John Keats. And I thought, wow, those are good. And so over the years, starting in, 1988 or so, I've been collecting collections of sonnets. And one of them that I found is called The Sonnets of Michelangelo. And most of these, he was Italian, is the same Michelangelo who did the sculpture of David and the frescoes in the Sistine Chapels, but he also wrote pretty good poetry. So this is a translation, but they did keep the Petrarchan form in the translation. Sometimes when sonnets are translated, they use what's called blank verse, which is, it has the same meter as a sonnet, iambic pentameter meter, but they don't try to rhyme the lines at all. This one, however, they did. This is sonnet number 20. It's called The Garland and the Girdle. What joy hath yon glad wreath of flowers that is around her golden hair so deftly twined, each blossom pressing forward from behind, as though to be the first her brows to kiss. The livelong day her dress hath perfect bliss, that now reveals her breast, now seems to bind, and that fair woven net of gold refined rests on her cheek and throat in happiness. Yet still more blissful seems to me the band, gilt at the tips, so sweetly doth it ring, and clasp the bosom that it serves to lace. Yea, and the belt, to such as understand, bound round her waist, saith, Here I'd ever cling. What would my arms do in that girdle's place? So, he didn't write entirely love poems, but that was one of them. So those are the 4 example poems. Well, I have one more, and this is Edna St. Vincent Millay's sonnet number 63. And I think now I will hand out these worksheets. So what I have done with this is the exclamation points are stressed syllables, and the apostrophes are unstressed syllables. And then over to the right is the rhyme scheme. So sounds like A, sounds like B, sounds like B, sounds like A. And as you get a new sound, it gets a new letter. So first of all, I'm going to tell you what iambic pentameter is. So an iambic foot is like an unstressed fit syllable followed by a stressed syllable. It's kind of like, my girlfriend taught me this. She said, you go duh, 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 duh. And because you do it with your foot, it reminds you that it's an iambic foot. So, and then iambic pentameter is a sequence of 5 iambic feet. Now, when you're writing a sonnet, you don't have to follow the iambic pentameter meter perfectly throughout the poem. You're allowed to fudge it a little bit here and there. And when you do that, it has a tendency, or at least it can make the poem more interesting. So I'm going to read this Edna St. Vincent Millay Sonnet 63 with the stress sounds so that you can tell, and you can see the way this is written. I'm not saying that my stress and unstressed analysis is perfect, but I'm going to read it like this. Life, were thy pains as are the pains of hell, so hardly to be born, yet to be born, and all thy boughs more grim with wasp and thorn than armored bough stood ever, too chill to spell with the warm tongue, and sharp with broken shell thy ways, whereby in wincing haste forlorn the desperate foot must travel, blind and torn. Yet must I cry, so be it, it is well. So fair to me thy vineyards, nor less fair than the sweet heaven my fathers hoped to gain. So bright this earthly blossom spiked with care, this harvest hung behind the boughs of pain. Needs must I gather, guessing by the stain I bleed, but know not wherefore, know not where. So that was with the emphasis, and now I'm going to just read it as I would read it without, and you can look at it and see what you think. Life, were thy pains as are the pains of hell, so hardly to be born, yet to be born, and all thy boughs more grim with wasp and thorn than armored bough stood ever. Too chill to spell with the warm tongue, and sharp with broken shell thy ways, whereby in wincing haste forlorn the desperate foot must travel, blind and torn. Yet must I cry, so be it, it is well. So fair to me thy vineyards, nor less fair than the sweet heaven my fathers hoped to gain. So bright this earthly blossom spiked with care, this harvest hung behind the boughs of pain. Needs must I gather, judging by the stain I bleed, but know not wherefore, know not where. So that is sonnet number 63 by Edna St. Vincent Millay. It's one of my favorites, and I recited it mostly from memory. I don't have many poems memorized, but this was one I thought worth keeping. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you all a few minutes to look at that sheet and to think about it, and then I'll ask people if they can give me a sample of a line of iambic pentameter. So for a Petrarchan sonnet, the first 8 lines are just 2 sounds. So it's A, B, B, A, B, B, A. So there's 3 rhymed couplets there. And then in this particular poem, it's C, D, C, D, D, C. But at the bottom of the page, there are several options for the last 6 lines, and I list 6 of them. So that's part of what makes writing a Petrarchan sonnet difficult, is that you have these options. How do I want to rhyme the last 6 lines? And Edna St. Vincent Millay was very good at utilizing those choices in creating very interesting poems. But I'll let you get back to thinking about this, and and for the people who came in late, an iambic, an iamb is da da, da da, an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. Oh, and we have another participant. Here you go. I'm just explaining iambic pentameter, what an iamb is. So an iamb is da da, da da, an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. So, for example, so hardly to be born, yet to be born. That's 5 iambic feet. Da da, da da, da da, da da, da da. So we're looking for, even if you can't come up with a line of iambic pentameter, maybe you can come up with a foot or 2 of iambic, an iambic foot. The first 8 lines of a Petrarchan sonnet are start with the first sound, in this case hell, and then the second line is home, and born and thorn, which form a couplet, and then the next 2 lines are spell and shell, which are a couplet using the hell rhyme scheme, and then one more couplet, forlorn and torn, and then ending with the first sound, well, which rhymes with hell again. So that's constant in the Petrarchan sonnet. Those first 8 lines are always have those 3 couplets, and then they kind of the split couplet at the beginning and the end. And then you've got a choice. You've got 6 choices. You could use C, D, E, C, D, E. When I write Petrarchan sonnets, I usually just use C, D, E, C, D, E. And the main difference that is like, I mean, you might notice the couplets early in the Petrarchan sonnet, but you might not. And what's distinguishing about a Shakespearean sonnet is, there are no couplets in it. It's like A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and then a rhymed couplet at the end, G, G. So, one of the easiest ways to spot a Shakespearean sonnet is to see if there's a rhymed couplet at the end. And if there is, there's a good chance that it's Shakespearean. But, if the top is structured like a Petrarchan sonnet, you look at the top and you see, is it alternating rhymes or are they couplets up at the top? And so Petrarchan sonnets are harder to write because the first 8 lines only have 2 sounds, and you got to get 4 rhymes for each sound, which I have learned over time. You want to, at least I often turn to, there's the internet. I used to have a rhyming dictionary, and that was helpful, but now we have something called rhymezone.com, and you go there and you put in your word, and it'll come up with a whole bunch of rhymes for that word. And some of the rhymes are perfect. It starts off with perfect rhymes, and then it goes to near rhymes. First and birth are near rhymes. And you can get away with a near rhyme or 2 in a Petrarchan sonnet, because you don't want to be forced into writing something that it's just a forced rhyme. It's better to use a near rhyme than to force it. So, but and with RhymeZone, for instance, it'll tell you, this is like an 86% rhyme, or this is a 90% rhyme, or whatever. Or there's something else called a slant rhyme, which I wouldn't use a slant rhyme for a sonnet, but you might use it somewhere else. It's not as close as a near rhyme to the actual perfect rhyme. Why don't we hear what we've got so far to make sure that everything's going on the right track? All right, who wants to go first?
I can go first, but
Okay.
there is a but.
Okay, but, yes.
English is not my first language.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that I understood properly the direction, so I could be all wrong. I thought you said the beat foot was da-da-da, da-da-da, so I went with that. So I started instead of da-da, da-da. Okay?
Okay.
Does that work? Okay, I'm not sure anything of that makes sense, but I'll try. I'll read what I have.
Okay.
Through the screen, the birds sing high to the sun, waking me in my dreams of life's summer. Already the long day seems to blur. All is here but has not yet begun. So I did an ABBA.
That's nice. That's very
Was
nice.
it the direction?
It was, it sounded good. It's certainly poetry. Can you read it again?
Sure. Through the screen, the birds sing high to the sun, waking me in my dreams of life's summer. Already the long day seems to blur. All is here, but has not yet begun.
Well, I like it very much. It's certainly not, textbook iambic pentameter, but it does sound good, and you're consistent. And it's about the length of an iambic pentameter line. I mean, you can certainly continue to make a poem out of it, and if you want to call it a sonnet, that's fine, because modern English sonnets don't even try to do meter.
Okay.
So keep working on it, and I think it's beautiful what you've got.
I saw my friend today. She was not well. I think she thought with haste rather than swell.
Okay, that is iambic pentameter. Good. That is a good way to start. Usually when I write a sonnet, I come up with the first line, and once I've got the first line, it's, I'll sit on it and think for a while, and I get a second line. So then, those are two sounds, and sometimes you don't write them in order. So just having a BB is a good place to start, and you could think back for an A later or whatever. But that is certainly iambic pentameter.
Okay, that's what I was trying to do
rhymes
rather
nicely.
than trying to get more of a.
Because
Before I graph rhyme,
there
I was
is
just trying to get words that
there
made
is a
sense.
learning curve to the meter.
Yeah.
And there have been times I've written poems and I've looked back and how is this iambic pentameter? It's like, well, I guess it seemed like it at the time, but still, I do like. What was your name again? Christine. I do like your four lines. They have an energy to them. They have a consistency to them. They're certainly poetry, and like I said, modern English sonnets don't even try to have meter most of the time, but yours does, and it has rhyme. So, you're welcome.
So here we go. Should I emphasize the word?
Just read it, and I can listen to the meter.
Reality is the confirmation of what is true. We face the task of our time or not. Nothing stops a moment which is not often sought. A challenge not sought awaits if we hear the cue.
That is also not iambic pentameter, but it is consistent, and it has a meter of its own, and you followed a Petrarchan rhyme scheme for the first four lines. So like Christine, you're doing your own thing, but there is a meter to it. And like I said, in modern English sonnets, they don't even always have a meter, and they often don't try to rhyme at all. But I enjoyed it. It means something to you, and I can tell when you read it that there's information in there to unpack. And that's part of what makes a poem interesting. But at the same time, what was your name? Deborah. At the same time, Deborah, learning the meter just with whatever words you put together is the first step in working on to. After you understand the meter, then you can say, well, what words do I want to use here? What meaning do I want to put in this poem? And so you're off to a good start as well. Learning poetry is a very personal thing. So I encourage people to learn in whatever way works best for them.
So John, one of the Petrarchan sonnets that you wrote, do you remember where that started? What was the source of that sonnet? And were you intending to write it in that form when you wrote it?
Okay, so with Petrarchan, I've written probably 200 Shakespearean sonnets and maybe 10 Petrarchan sonnets. And what I do when I'm writing a Petrarchan sonnet is, I'll start off with the first line, and then I'll think, this might be interesting as a Petrarchan sonnet, and then I'll come up with a second line, and then I'll look for, a couplet to make out of the second line, and then kind of work my way down. So yes, for me, writing a Petrarchan sonnet rather than a Shakespearean sonnet is a choice I make at the beginning of the poem.
So can you tell me what is the difference between, so like I know the first 8 lines are different than the last 6 lines.
Yes, so the first 8 lines only have 2 rhyme sounds. So looking at this, so hell and then born and thorn rhyme, and then spell and shell rhyme with hell, and then forlorn and torn, and then back again to the A, which is well. So that is like the hardest part of writing the Petrarchan sonnet, is getting through those first 8 lines, because you have to have just 2 sounds to rhyme with, and you have to have 4 rhymes for each sound. And that can be hard to do.
2 sounds, 4 rhymes.
4 rhymes for each sound. Because there's 8 lines, and so you've got 4 lines ending in one sound and 4 lines ending in the other sound.
And then the last 6 lines can be one of those down there at the bottom.
Yes, yes. And just to make things kind of easy on myself, I usually do the CDE, CDE, rather than try to think in advance, well, which of these 6 combinations do I want to try for?
So I tried a CDE, CDE. Can I read it just to see if
Yeah,
that's
sure.
supposed to be?
Yeah,
It's
let's hear
very
it.
simple again. It's just,
Okay,
I was just trying to see if I could even get the sound of it. He fell off his chair and made a big splash, but he was okay. He was a big bear who made a dash the other day.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So is that
And
CDE?
that is CDE, CDE.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, and it is just about 1 o'clock, unless anybody has any more questions or wants to share anything else. I think we'll wrap it up.
One final question, John.
Yes, Bruce.
I'm enamored with the idea of how many Shakespearean sonnets you've written versus Petrarchan. So you said you've written over 200 Shakespearean sonnets.
It's an estimate.
Was that intentional, or that's kind of where you landed with that?
Well, I mean, I was much more familiar with Shakespearean going into it, and I had a fairly easy time writing Shakespearean sonnets, and whenever I would try to write a Petrarchan sonnet, I was kind of stumped by needing 4 sounds of each, needing just 2 sounds for the first 8 lines. It's harder to do, but as I've gotten more experienced, I've been more likely to write Petrarchan sonnets. And I think Petrarchan sonnets are beautiful, and some of my favorite sonnets are Petrarchan sonnets, but in my opinion, they're harder to write. I've eased up a little on myself. I used to strive for perfect rhymes all the time, but now I'm a little more open to near rhymes. And when you're writing a Petrarchan sonnet, to use near rhymes makes it a lot easier to write a good sonnet.
And when you say near rhymes, that means almost
Like-
rhymes, but not quite.
Yes, not quite. Like first and birth are near rhymes.
Is there a connection to the love poems of Petrarchan sonnets all the time?
Doesn't have to be. Like I said, this book of sonnets by Michelangelo isn't all love sonnets, but they're all Petrarchan sonnets. And even I did read all 350 of Petrarch sonnets, which I had been putting off for years, and finally I sat down and I said, well, these are pretty good. I didn't think they would be good because they're all about unrequited love, and I thought, well, how interesting could that be? But it turns out it is interesting. And then he throws in a lot of sonnets in that mix that aren't really about Laura, his unrequited love for Laura. He talks about, the church a little bit, or his friends, or that kind of thing. He writes some sonnets about that. But he's the one, it's named after Petrarch, and he's the one who established the sonnet as the premier vehicle for writing love poems in the Elizabethan era, and in Italy too, I think. So, well, it started in Italy, and then eventually the Elizabethans caught on. So, anyway, I want to thank you all for coming and for your hard work. And I congratulate you all on the lines that you have written, because they all have value and are interesting, and hopefully they help you to grow in some way. So thank you all, and I hope you have a great week.